everyone, this is Amanda Borchel-Dan.
And I'm Jessica Steinberg,
your host for Times Will Tell,
a weekly podcast from the Times of Israel. Hello, Times Will Tell listeners. It's Jessica Steinberg, here this week with best-selling author Faye Kellerman, whose final installment in her Decker Lazarus series, the new book The Hunt, comes out this August. In this book, which I just finished, we're back with Detective Peter Decker and his wife Rina, and they are boarding a plane to Israel. And there's a crisis. Peter Decker finds out about a new case. A body is found in the woods where a man went missing. And that's not the only crisis, of course. We've also got this very intensive situation with Teresa McLaughlin, the biological mother of Peter and Rina's foster son, Gabe. She is fleeing a messy divorce, and one of her two children is kidnapped. And she ends up turning to Gabe's father, her ex, a former hitman. So there's some very, very intensive drama here and plenty of crime, punishment, suspense, really all the things that you expect from a Faye Kellerman novel. And it feels very far from Faye Kellerman's real life, or at least certain parts of it. But first, let me turn to Faye and say hello, Faye, and welcome to The Times Will Tell. It's very good to have you here with us.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you very much.
So it's kind of funny. So in the beginning of the book, Peter and Rina are heading to Israel, where you just returned from, where you are living part of the year, or I know that you have a home there. What's your Jerusalem life at this point in time?
My husband and I usually go there twice a year for at least a month to 6 weeks. We like to go after the Chagim, after the holidays, in the spring and in the fall. We usually catch one of the holidays or the tail end of one of them, which is just fine with us too. And they're particularly beautiful times of the season to go there. It's not too hot, it's not too rainy. And we love it there. My husband went to yeshiva there in 68. We honeymooned there in 1972. We've been off and on there for at least, 50 years. So.
Wow. Yeah. So definitely a second home for sure. So Faye, let's talk about the book a little bit, because of course your Peter Decker and Rina fans, I'm sure, are eagerly awaiting, and it's the last in this series.
Maybe.
Tell me a little bit about what made you decide this was going to be it. What brought you to this point with them? Because I'm sure you're obviously writing other things, but in terms of these particular protagonists.
Actually, I'm taking some time off of writing, period. I'm going to give, it's a big birthday this year, a big birthday, and I want to spend more time with my children and grandchildren and traveling and doing all the things that usually people of my age do. Without something hanging over my head. It is the last book in the series right now. Who knows what's going to happen? I don't want to give any spoilers away, but as of right now, I'm taking some time off, some extended time off. We'll put it that way. I had envisioned this book in my head from both angles, from the Peter angle and from the Chris and Terry angle, for a long time, since I introduced these characters way back in the book Justice. And they have been fans' favorites and have made cameos, and sometimes even more than cameos, in books along the way. So this is what I had thought about for a long time. One of the reasons I like it is because the Chris and Terry thing is so dysfunctional compared to Decker and Rina, which works like clockwork.
Right.
It was an interesting comparison and an interesting contrast in what a good relationship be and what a dysfunctional relationship is. And the common thread, of course, is Gabe, women, their foster kids, and Chris and Terry's biological child. And, the weirdest, the best, sometimes really great kids come from very dysfunctional families, and sometimes really dysfunctional kids come from the so-called really good family. So it was interesting for me to write about.
No, I'm sure it was a fascinating writing process, because really, as you keep on turning the pages and uncovering other parts of the relationships, and especially of Chris and Terry, you can't really believe that they're involved in what they're involved in, and how they each yeah, how their characters basically are unpeeled and unfolded in this. As you say, though, it makes a lot of sense in that sense to really have that comparison between the two. But how, even though you're saying that you might not say goodbye, what does it feel like when you are writing characters that you know that you might not see for a long time and that you've had these long relationships with?
I still feel I have a relationship with Peter and Rina. I won't give any spoilers away, but they're still very close in my heart, and they're very close to where I want them to be and what I want them to be. So I can revisit them if I so desire to do in the future. It's not going to be another series again. It would be like a one-off. Peter wants to do certain things, and Rina wants to do certain things too. They are of that age, and they're friends, they're family, they're in my head. And even now, when I say it's my last book, they're still talking to me and going, well, what about this case? What about that case? You can do this, you can do that. So they never really disappear.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So this was something I kept on thinking about, given that you and your husband are both writers. Are there how many similarities are there, or how much do you channel your own marital relationship when you write Peter and Rina, or not at all? Meaning, how much of you is in them?
They are their own unique duo, their own unique relationship, their own unique fun. They are not Jonathan and me. They are themselves. However, since all your characters, I hate to say it because I've written some pretty weird characters. Every single one of those characters that one writes comes out of your brain. They have to be part of you in some way, shape, or form. Either, as my editor said about Chris, he really is the other. And that otherness must be somewhere in my brain, because how else could I write somebody like that? Certainly Peter and Rina's faith and the way they practice their Judaism and their love for their Judaism comes out of me. I mean, I couldn't have written 30 some odd books with two people who are as, pro-Israel and as pro-Judaism and as practicing Jews if I didn't feel that way myself.
Right.
The passion has to come from somewhere.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because of course you've never shied away from this very long-standing series. You've never shied away from really delving into Judaism in a very intensive way in your books. But we're also living in a different world than we were back when you started this series. Do you remember what year?
The book came out in 1986.
1986.
No cell phones, no personal computers. They still had a lot of detective work. No DNA either. A lot of detective work has become more technical, with phone tracing and with the ability to follow people and phone apps that you can put on, and locations, and a lot of crimes, especially cold cases, come back because they have DNA matches. However, the basics of crime is still detection work. There is still a great deal of brain work where you have to figure out who it is and what it is. And then you do all the technicalities to state your case. But at some point, there has to be some just old-fashioned legwork, old-fashioned brain work to solve a case. And that's what I find way more interesting, not, little manipulations of this and CCTV. That's great. That's all once you've got a lead somewhere. But, you find a body, and unless you know exactly what happened, there has to be some mental work. And that's what Decker's good at. But the series has very much changed. They have evolved, but they're still the same old great couple that they were, I think, way back in 1985.
Let's take a quick break for my conversation with best-selling author Faye Kellerman about her latest book, The Hunt, the final installment in her Decker Lazarus series coming out next month in August. And we're back with Faye Kellerman. We're talking about her latest trip to Israel, what it's like writing about Jewish characters, and a few other topics. going back to that thought about Judaism, Jewish characters, your readership, your audience, what really led you at the very beginning to say, I'm going to bring this Jewishness in deep. I'm really not going to shy away from any of it? Because those of us who either live that life or live near that life or are aware of it and comfortable with it, familiar with it, it's still sometimes something of a shock to say, wow, it's like living in Jerusalem in a sense. It's all around you.
She gets it.
Right.
When you first write a book, and my first book was The Ritual Bath, you don't know that's your first book, okay? You don't know that this is going to get published. So I was writing a little bit of this, writing a little bit of that, and then I kind of narrowed it down to what was important to me and what attached to me, what was feeling to me, what I could write about with passion and with enthusiasm. Because if you're not totally in love with your book, how do you expect readers to be in love with your book? So I said, what's important to me? I'm a woman. I have a great brain. I'm a mother. I'm a wife, and I'm a trained dentist, but I didn't want to write about that since Marathon Man. But I know a lot about anatomy through dental school. And my Judaism, because it's the life that I lived and it's what was important to me. And it punctuated not only my daily life, but the year. When you live a traditional or semi-traditional or Jew-Israeli kind of life, it's punctuated by holidays, just like Christmas and Easter is for Christians or, whatever the Muslim, and it's punctuated. So this is what I wanted to do. So Rina came first. She was a truly religious woman, and I wanted to present religion in a way that was accessible and not fanatical. Mm-hmm. Even though she has very, very strong beliefs, she's a human being that you can relate to, because so much of Hollywood presents, anytime you have a religious person, they present them as off-the-wall fanatics. And of course there's off-the-wall fanatics in religion. There's off-the-wall fanatics in the right-wing parties and the left-wing parties, wherever you want. There's crazy people everywhere. So I wanted to present a really beautiful, wonderful woman who was religious. And she not only had a relationship with my Jewish readers out there, whether religious or not, they also had a relationship with people who are of faith. They said, thank you not for making a person crazy. So she was the one who started. But I didn't want Rina to start solving crimes like the Kellerman series, The Rabbi Who Slept With. That was just inauthentic. Not that fiction writing is authentic, but I wanted a little bit more within the realms of reality. So Peter came along. And she was a widow. I knew she had to be a widow because if she wasn't a widow, if she was married, she wouldn't get involved in something like that. But right. She was alone and he was alone. So I said, all right, you're writing a novel. You want attention. Let's throw a romance in there. And that's how The Ritual Bath was basically born. It wasn't a mission to proselytize or to show everybody how wonderful Judaism was. It was a book that was about faith-based people who are normal people. And, that's what true diversity is, and seeing the normality in beyond the clothing and beyond the everything, going down to the basics and what makes us all human. And we all are human.
Right. It's all there. So now when you look back on this body of work, this series, and you are thinking about doing different things with your life right now, focusing on what it is that you want to focus on, what is that like to sort of look at it, to take a step away from it and look at all of it and say, never intended for this to happen. This is what happened as a result of this series that I wrote. What does it make you think about in terms of what you would want to work on going forward and what it means to say, okay, this is what I've been doing for the last few decades?
I never intended, like you said, for anything to come of it. As I said, you write a book, you hope it gets published. Then once it gets published, you hope it sells. It didn't sell much. The Ritual Bath, when it first came out in hardcover, sold 1,700 copies in all of the United States. And that was at a time where we still had bookstores.
Right.
It wasn't at a time where ebooks was anything. So it was not considered a rousing success. But at that time, too, people had patience. And they said, okay, you can write another one. They didn't pay me much, but I didn't care, just the ability to write another one. And then the next one sold a little bit more, and then the next one sold a little bit more. As I said, when you're writing a series novels, you need patience, and your readers, you need to build up your readership. And my publisher, which was Arbor House, then William Morrow, and it's still William Morrow, was extremely patient, and I'm glad it paid off for them. As far as fame or anything like that, a teeny bit of fame, but in name recognition among certain groups, there is the recognition. And people have said very kind things to me, and I'm very, very happy about that, mostly about how the representation of my characters are realistic. I got it right. Well, of course I got it right. I kind of lived that life. But it's not only the specifics are right, the whole gestalt is very relatable. And it's you can't just do things on Jewish things. It has to be relatable to everybody.
Sure.
And I've gotten some of the most really, really nice comments from people of all different types and backgrounds. And it's been really, really rewarding, extremely rewarding. And I love my characters, and I'm glad they see it the way that I wanted to present it.
That's wonderful. So switching gears just for a second before we close things up here, what do you love to read, or what do you love to read these days? I'm curious if it's in this genre or if it's something completely different.
I read a lot of mysteries. Right now, I'm just reading a ton of fiction, nonfiction. I love biography. I love histories. I guess at a certain age, you want to go back and see things from ancient, from Israel and its antiquities and up forward through the whole of Western civilization. And it's very fascinating to me. I love learning, and I love anything. I went through a stage where I did all the American presidents. There was a series. David McCullough came out with some. I went through a Lincoln phase, and it's fun. But I do like reading fiction if I can find a really good book. A lot of the fiction these days is chick lit, which is great. But it's not of my generation, and it doesn't speak to me as much. Mm-hmm. So, you like to read something moves you. So,
right. And just curious, in terms of the time that you spend in Israel, has that sent you in some different reading directions as well? Do various trips and stays in Israel kind of point you in another direction? You mentioned archaeology, but I'm curious if there's other books or directions that you're delving into as well.
Well, a lot of history of the region. I think it's completely fascinating. That whole cradle of civilization is very, very interesting. And yes, Israel definitely does put you in a different direction when you're there. It's very hard to explain to a person who doesn't, spend a lot of time there. But while you're there, you really, my husband speaks Hebrew. I speak a little bit of Hebrew. You get into the zeitgeist of what's there, and it's the politics. It's very interesting. You get into their politics, and it's such a pleasure because you can leave your own politics alone for a while. And as a Jewish person, to be in a country where you don't have to constantly explain yourself is a freedom I have never felt. And that was from way back in 72, from my first trip where I sat down there. I normally have dark curly hair. And the first thing I did when I landed and we started walking around, I said, everybody looks like me here. I said, what happened? They all look like me. And it's a very comforting feeling. to be in a land with your peeps.
I get it. Yes. And of course, lots of hairdressers who know how to deal with dark, curly hair.
Dark curly hair. Yeah. You have them there, you have them here. This is all white. This is white. So I said, just make it blonde, what the heck?
Exactly. Have fun with it. And Israeli hairdressers like to have fun. Absolutely.
They do.
So Faye Kellerman, it's really been a pleasure. I'm just going to mention to our listeners that the book is out in late August, right? August 22nd, I believe. And
around there, yeah.
Right, around then. That's when it hits, obviously, bookshelves and, Kindle readers and anywhere that you read your books. And have fun reading it. But I would say don't necessarily read it in the dark, read it in the daytime. So, although I have a very low tolerance for the fear factor. So that's me, but just making it clear for everyone else.
Thank you very, very, very much. It was a pleasure being here, Jessica. Thank you.
Same. All right, listeners, tune in and we'll be back on Sunday with our daily briefing. Until then, be well.
Thanks so much for listening to Times Will Tell from the Times of Israel, and thanks to our producer, Gilad Brownstein.
Please subscribe wherever you find your podcasts and check out our daily briefing news show every Sunday through Thursday.
Like what you hear? Consider rating us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to spread the word.
Until next week.
Shalom.